What if I told you that the only reason you fear death is because you've been taught to? From the moment you were old enough to understand that life ends, you were handed stories, images, and beliefs about what waits beyond that final breath. Maybe it was eternal blackness, maybe it was heaven or hell, maybe it was nothing at all. But here's the real question. What if none of that is true? What happens after you die? It's a question you can't avoid. It lives in the back of your mind, quietly threading itself through every relationship, every loss, every sleepless night, when you stare at the ceiling and wonder what this is all leading to. It's not morbid to ask that question. In fact, it's one of the most important questions you'll ever face. And yet, in a world obsessed with proof and productivity, most people are afraid to truly look it in the eye. You've probably heard the common answers. The scientific, materialist worldview tells you that consciousness is just a byproduct of brain chemistry, a flicker of awareness created by neurons firing in just the right pattern. According to that logic, when your body dies, so do you, not in some dramatic, poetic way, just gone. No memory, no awareness, no experience, just nothing. But have you ever tried to imagine nothing? Not blackness, not darkness, not a void, just the total absence of anything. No color, no sound, no time, no thought, no you. Here's the strange part, you can't. Your mind will try to fill the silence with an image or a sensation because it can't comprehend non-experience. Why? Because you've never experienced it. And you never will. Consciousness has no frame of reference for its own absence. You can imagine being asleep. You can imagine being unconscious. But you can't imagine not being. And that's the first crack in the wall of the materialist story. If death is truly the end, then what exactly ends? Does consciousness really vanish, or does it simply change form? Does it fade into nothingness, or does it shift, like a dream dissolving into another dream, without ever knowing where one stops and the next begins? You see, the belief that death equals non-existence is not actually rooted in experience. It's a belief system, like any other. It's based on assumptions that are rarely questioned. That the mind is the brain, that awareness is accidental, and that the universe is indifferent to our consciousness. But ask yourself, do those ideas feel complete? Or do they leave something out, something essential? You've felt it. In the quiet moments, when you're alone with your thoughts, or watching a loved one slip away, or standing in a vast forest where everything feels connected. That haunting feeling that there's more, not just more to life, but more beyond it. A deeper rhythm, an unseen thread weaving through every soul, whispering that awareness is not something that breaks, it's something that bends, transforms, and continues. Cultures all over the world have carried that intuition. From ancient spiritual traditions to modern mystics, the belief that consciousness survives death has echoed across time. Not because it's comforting, but because it reflects something primal, something that feels more like remembering than learning. A truth that lives in your bones, even when your mind can't explain it. But here's where it gets interesting. You don't need religion to believe in the survival of consciousness. You don't need ancient texts or dogma. You only need to ask the question honestly. Is it really logical to assume that the most mysterious and fundamental part of you, your awareness, just evaporates when the body stops functioning? Or is it possible that what you are, what you really are, isn't limited to the fragile container you inhabit? Suspend your disbelief for just a moment. Forget everything you've been taught about death. Don't try to solve the question yet, just feel it. Let yourself stand on the edge of it, not in fear, but in awe. You are not just a collection of flesh and memories. You are a being that knows you are a being, and that simple fact, the undeniable presence of awareness, is not easily explained away. Consider this. If consciousness is purely physical, then it should behave like any other physical thing. But it doesn't. Consciousness doesn't take up space. It doesn't have mass. It doesn't operate in dimensions we can measure. And most importantly, it never experiences its own non-existence. Even in dreamless sleep, where time disappears, awareness resumes, as if no gap had occurred at all. So then, what is death? Is it a break in experience? Or is it a doorway, a passage from one mode of being into another? And if it is a passage, then who, or what, crosses that threshold? Is it the you identify with now? Or something deeper, something unshakable and eternal that's been with you all along? You've probably heard the saying, you were born from nothing, and you'll return to nothing. But that assumes a beginning and an end. What if, instead, you are part of something that never began and can never end? What if the sense of you is just one expression of an infinite, ongoing field of awareness, one that births new perspectives like the ocean births waves? That changes everything. Because if that's true, then death isn't the end of consciousness, it's simply the end of a chapter, and the story goes on. So why don't more people ask these questions? Why is death treated like a taboo, something to be feared, denied, or joked about nervously? Maybe it's because we've been trained to believe that only what can be measured is real, that feelings, intuitions, and experiences that don't fit neatly into charts and data are irrelevant. But the deepest truths have never come from measurements. They've come from moments of clarity, of silence, of stillness, when something inside you says, this isn't all there is. You've felt it, you might have brushed it off, but that feeling, that knowing, it's the doorway, and now it's opening. We're going to walk through it together, not with blind faith, but with open eyes and open minds. Because what waits on the other side of that door isn't darkness or fear, it's the most profound truth you've ever encountered. You are not a temporary flicker in the night, you are not a random accident, you are consciousness itself, ever unfolding, ever aware, ever alive. And as we begin to unravel the illusion of death, what you'll find isn't an ending, it's a beginning you've always known but never dared to believe. So let's go deeper, because what's waiting for you has been there all along. What comes to mind when you think of death? For most people, it's something like a dark room, a silent void, an eternal blackness where everything ends. It's often imagined as a kind of bottomless pit, where your thoughts, your identity, your memories, all that made you, simply vanish. This image of death as a blank screen, a frozen pause, or an endless sleep without dreams has been deeply ingrained in the collective imagination. But there's something wrong with this picture. Because when you take a moment to really examine it, to sit with it, and ask whether this is actually possible, you begin to notice a paradox forming. You're being asked to imagine what cannot be imagined, to experience the absence of all experience. And in that realization, the illusion begins to crack. Let's look more closely. The idea of death as eternal blackness is one of the most common but least examined beliefs in the modern world. Maybe you've pictured it that way yourself at some point, a kind of silent extinction, like the moment a candle is snuffed out. But ask yourself honestly, what does that blackness actually feel like? Not just in theory, but in real, felt awareness. Have you ever truly experienced nothing? Think back to dreamless sleep. You might say that's the closest we get to non-experience. But even then, when you wake up, there's something you refer to. You say, I was out cold, or I didn't dream last night, or I don't remember anything. There's a gap. And yet you were there to notice the gap afterward. That awareness, however subtle, is still a form of continuity. It's like a thread that remains unbroken, even if it temporarily disappears from your attention. Now think of the last time you were under general anesthesia. That blackout moment, gone in a blink, with no memory of what happened in between, is often held up as the clearest evidence that consciousness can turn off. But here's the thing. You didn't experience the turning off. You weren't there to observe it. You simply weren't aware. And then you were again. The lights didn't dim into darkness. They just weren't there. And then they were. What you call nothing is always retroactively labeled. It is never something you can point to while it's happening. This is why the entire notion of eternal nothingness after death is logically flawed. You can't experience the absence of experience. You can't be present in a state where presence itself has disappeared. This is where Epicurus, the ancient Greek philosopher, offered a profoundly liberating insight. He wrote, "Death is nothing to us. When we exist, death is not. And when death exists, we are not." At first glance, this seems like a statement meant to reduce your fear, but it also hides a powerful metaphysical truth. The very structure of consciousness makes it impossible for you to ever be in the state called death. You cannot simultaneously be present and not be. The moment you imagine yourself in a void, you're still imagining yourself there. There's still awareness, still an I observing the silence. And that changes everything. Because the fear of nothingness isn't really fear of death, it's fear of imagining being trapped in death, but that presumes you can still be in it, that you can sit inside a black box and feel the emptiness. But that's not how it works. You can't enter the experience of non-experience. There's no you to do the entering. To help ground this, try a simple exercise. Close your eyes and try to imagine what it would be like to be nothing, not asleep, not floating in space, not looking at a black screen, but truly nothing. No time, no space, no sensation, no thought. You can't do it, can you? Because the very act of trying already proves the existence of awareness. The only thing you can conjure up are dim images, shadows, representations, but they all exist within awareness. So, in a very real sense, the fear of non-existence becomes absurd, because in order to fear it, you already have to exist. So then what is death? If it's not blackness, not a place, not a condition we can inhabit, then what is it really? Maybe it's not an event we go into, but rather a transition we can't remain conscious of. Just like before you were born, you didn't experience being not alive. You weren't in some cosmic waiting room. You weren't somewhere watching time pass until your birth arrived. You simply weren't. And now, here you are, awake, thinking, feeling, being. There's no memory of not being, because not being can't be remembered. And yet, consciousness has appeared again. This raises a possibility most people never consider, that death doesn't mark the end of awareness at all, only the end of one localized perspective. And from that perspective, yes, it feels like an ending. But that's only because you're looking at it from the inside of a particular storyline, a character who feels their thread is being cut. But what if you're not the thread? What if you're the canvas it was drawn on? What if awareness doesn't stop when the character does? You don't expect the movie screen to vanish when the film ends. The screen is always there, the stories just come and go. It may be that consciousness isn't something the brain generates, but rather something the brain filters or tunes into, like a radio dial, tuning in and out of frequencies. When the brain stops functioning, it's not that consciousness vanishes, it's that this particular channel stops playing. But that doesn't mean the signal is gone, only the receiver changed. You see, death as eternal nothingness is more of a metaphor than a metaphysical truth. It's a mental construct, a symbol of the unknown, that we mistakenly take literally. But symbols are not reality. They're fingers pointing at the moon, not the moon itself. And when you mistake the symbol for the thing, you live in fear of something that doesn't actually exist. The mind is terrified by the idea of no more me. But the deeper truth is this: the me has always been a collection of passing forms, thoughts, memories, labels. What's underneath all that? What's always been here, watching the changes, doesn't end. It doesn't dissolve into nothing. Because it was never something to begin with. It was, and is, the field in which all somethings appear. So here's the paradox. You cannot experience non-experience. And if death is defined as non-experience, then it is not something you can ever truly encounter. This doesn't mean you're immortal in the egoic sense. It doesn't mean you'll continue on as the same person, with your same name, memories, and preferences. But it does suggest something far more mysterious and far more beautiful. That you, the experiencer, never actually vanish. That awareness, pure, silent, formless, is never interrupted. Only the story is. And if that's true, then death is not an ending. It's not a falling into some eternal blackness. It's more like a shift, a reset, a movement into a new scene you can't yet imagine. Like the pause between dreams, like the breath before awakening. And when that moment comes for you, not as an idea, but as a direct experience, you may find that there was never nothing to fear, because you were never nothing to begin with. What if I told you that no matter where you've been, no matter what you've done, no matter how many versions of yourself you've lived through, you've never once stepped outside your own awareness? Even now, as you read this, you're not watching from a distance. You are here, experiencing this moment from the only place you ever have, the center of your own consciousness. Consciousness isn't something you can point to on a map or dissect under a microscope. It isn't a thing at all. It's a field of knowing. A quiet, uninterrupted stream of awareness within which every thought, every sensation, and every perception arises. It's not just that you have consciousness, it's that you are consciousness. It is the most intimate, undeniable part of your reality. You can doubt your memories, you can doubt your beliefs, you can even doubt your sense of self. But you cannot doubt the fact that something is experiencing it all. That experiencing presence, that is consciousness. You've likely never been outside of it, not even for a second. From your earliest childhood memories to this very moment, there has always been a sense of I am behind it all. Not always clear, not always verbal, but always present. You might forget who you are, where you are, or what you're doing, but you never lose that fundamental center of perception. You can look back on your life and notice how much you've changed. Your opinions shifted, your body aged, your identity evolved. And yet, throughout all of it, you were there, watching, sensing, witnessing. There is a continuous thread that runs through it all. That thread isn't your name, it's not your story, it's your awareness. Think about it. Even when you're not fully conscious, when you're asleep, dreaming, or under anesthesia, you never experience the absence of awareness. You simply return from it. And when you do, it's never jarring. You don't panic. You don't scream in terror from the void. You just wake up. You say, "Oh, I was out," and continue your day. Why? Because you, the experiencer, were never truly gone. You weren't experiencing nothing. You simply weren't experiencing anything. There's a difference. Nothingness, as a concept, still requires a witness. But during those moments of blankness, there is no witness, no story, no content. And yet, the moment you return, your awareness reclaims the flow as if no break had occurred. This is where the idea of personal subjective continuity becomes important. Your life feels like one continuous, seamless stream of awareness because, for you, it is. Even if you lose consciousness temporarily, it doesn't feel like a gap. Why? Because there's no experience of the gap. You only know it happened because someone told you, or because you looked at the clock and saw time had passed. From your perspective, your consciousness didn't vanish, it simply skipped forward. No pain, no waiting, just the next moment of experience. This continuity is the very essence of your lived reality. Even when you go under general anesthesia, a state where the brain is functionally offline, where even dreaming ceases, you never experience unconsciousness. You don't remember slipping into blackness and lingering in that void. You go from being here to being awake again, with no sense of a middle, and that should tell you something profound. The moments of unconsciousness don't register as you because your awareness doesn't accompany them. It's not that your awareness dies and is resurrected, it's that it temporarily lets go of form, of story, of input. But once it returns, it's still you, whole, uninterrupted, unbroken. Now take a step back and consider what this implies. If there's no subjective experience of non-being, can you ever truly be absent from experience? If there's never a moment in which you know you are not, then from the standpoint of awareness itself, is there really such a thing as death? Your entire life has unfolded within this single center of presence. You might think that presence is tied to your body, to your personality, to your name. But those are simply patterns that arise within awareness. Consciousness doesn't need those patterns to exist. It simply uses them as a lens to interact with this world. When you were 5 years old, you had a body, thoughts, and a worldview completely different from the ones you have now. But that didn't make you a different experiencer. You still experienced being, you just did it through a different lens. This brings us to something subtle but deeply powerful. You have never found consciousness. You've never generated it. You've only ever been it. And being it is not something you learned to do. It is not something you were taught or trained into. It is your most natural state. It is the canvas upon which everything else is painted. And here's the mystery. That canvas never shows any cracks. No matter how intense the emotion, how chaotic the environment, or how broken the identity, there is always a silent witnessing presence that remains untouched. If you were to lose all memories, if you forgot your name, your past, your relationships, you would still be you. Not the you others recognize, but the you that sees, that feels, that is. Consciousness isn't your story. It's the space in which your story is told. So why does this matter when we talk about death? Because the assumption most people make is that death marks the end of everything, the collapse of the body, the extinguishing of the mind, the vanishing of awareness. But awareness doesn't behave that way. It doesn't turn off like a light. When has it ever? Every time you've slipped into unconsciousness, it hasn't ended. It has paused content, not the awareness itself. And when you return, it continues, same field, same presence, same experiencer. This is why philosophers and mystics have long said that consciousness doesn't die with the body, it simply changes focus. Like a dream shifting into another dream, or a song fading into another melody you didn't know was playing. The mind might forget, the body might collapse, but the presence that perceives, that has never gone anywhere. Even now, think about the quiet stillness underneath your thoughts. The part of you that hears these words is not your voice, or your ego, or your thoughts. It's the silent perceiver, the listener behind the noise. That listener isn't young or old, it doesn't come and go, it simply is. It's the same listener that's been with you from the beginning. And if it's never left you, what makes you think it ever will? You've always been here, in this space of knowing, in this light of perception. The question is not will that end, but can it? And when you sit with that question long enough, you may begin to feel the truth, not as a belief, but as a deep inner resonance, that awareness cannot be destroyed because it was never created. It was simply always here, and you have always been aware. What if I told you there's a single thought experiment that has the power to shake your entire understanding of who you are, not just philosophically, but spiritually, viscerally? One idea that, if you sit with it long enough, starts to unravel the illusion you've carried your whole life, the illusion that you are a fixed person with a singular, unchanging identity. The illusion that there's a clear beginning and a clean end to your existence. What you're about to explore isn't just a mind game, it's a mirror. And when you look into it fully, you start to see something ancient staring back at you. Something that's been with you long before you were given a name. Imagine a world not so far into the future, where technology has reached astonishing levels of sophistication. In this world, there's a groundbreaking procedure called life pause. It's the kind of technology whispered about in sci-fi circles but fully realized here. Life pause allows an individual to undergo complete temporary suspension of consciousness. Think of it like hitting pause on a video game. Not only is your awareness halted completely, but while you're out, your mind and body can be transformed in any way you choose. Memories can be rewritten or erased. Personality traits can be adjusted. Physical features modified. Your preferences, values, emotional tendencies, all can be altered with surgical precision. Now enter Alex, a disillusioned soul, restless with life, weary of pain and monotony. Alex signs up for the life pause procedure, not for a week or a month, but indefinitely. They sign the consent form that allows the life pause team full access to make any modifications they deem beneficial. The goal? Reinvention, a total transformation. The plan is to return to life, not as a slightly improved version of Alex, but as something new, someone better, someone more aligned with joy, clarity, and purpose. The procedure begins, consciousness halts, all inner awareness ceases. From Alex's perspective, there is no dream, no memory, no passage of time, just a clean break in awareness. Now let's pause this story and ask the question, Who wakes up? When the process is complete, and the lights come back on, so to speak, someone emerges. Let's call this being Alex 2.0. But this new version doesn't remember the old one. They don't share the same fears, traumas, habits, or even preferences. Maybe Alex 2.0 loves things the original Alex hated. Maybe their body looks different, speaks differently, even feels different. And yet, here's the catch. Alex 2.0 opens their eyes, stretches their limbs, and feels alive. There's still experience happening. Still a first-person, I am, presence behind the eyes. So again, who wakes up? If the original memories are gone, the personality rewritten, the story erased, then what remains of the you that went under? If the awareness that wakes up feels whole and authentic, if it doesn't know what was lost and doesn't miss what was removed, can we really say that anything was truly broken? The experience continues, the screen is still lit, but the character has changed. Here lies the heart of the experiment, and the crack in the illusion we all carry. You've been taught that you are your memories, that your history defines you, that your identity is a solid, continuous structure. But this experiment shows something else. It reveals that what we call self is astonishingly flexible. That you can change everything, your face, your thoughts, your beliefs, your desires, and still wake up feeling like a real person, still having a conscious experience. So, if all of that can change, what doesn't? Go deeper. Imagine not just one Alex but billions, each one waking up in a different form, with no memory of the others, each one experiencing life with full vividness, full emotion, full aliveness. None of them aware they were once another. None aware they're part of the same larger field of awareness, simply playing different roles. Wouldn't that suggest that what we call identity is more like a mask than a face? That what you think is you is more like a role consciousness is currently performing. This isn't science fiction. It's a mirror for your own life. Because, in a sense, you've already been through multiple versions of yourself. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago. Your thoughts have changed. Your beliefs have shifted. Your body has aged. You've let go of dreams, adopted new ones, fallen in love, grieved, transformed, and yet, there's still something that feels like you behind it all. What is that? It's not your story. Stories change. It's not your thoughts. They come and go. It's not even your emotions. Those are waves on the surface. What remains is the awareness, the silent witness, the space in which all these things unfold. That's the thread. That's what never changes, even as everything else does. Now let's return to Alex. What if we told you that this is what happens at death? Not in a literal, technological sense, but in an experiential one. That when this life ends and the lights go out, consciousness doesn't stop, it just wakes up somewhere else. Maybe not with your name, maybe not with your story, but still awake, still observing, still experiencing. The Alex that went to sleep doesn't know what came before, but the experience doesn't end. There's still someone behind the eyes. And here's the wildest part. This may already have happened to you. You don't remember your birth. You don't remember before. You simply woke up one day in a body, in a world, with language and parents and culture wrapped around you like clothes you didn't choose. And now, here you are, thinking, feeling, existing. Maybe the last version of you already passed through the doorway, and you are what came next. This thought experiment collapses the illusion that death is a hard stop. It shifts your focus from the content of consciousness, your thoughts, your roles, your memories, to the container itself, the one thing that never goes away. You cannot touch it. You cannot name it, but it is what looks out from behind your eyes. It is what feels the breath enter your lungs. It is what watches this moment unfold, and it has no identity. It doesn't need one. If everything you believe about yourself can change, your preferences, your past, your sense of self, and you still feel real, then who, or what, are you really? The only logical answer is, you are the experiencer, the presence, the awareness behind the costume. And awareness, by its very nature, cannot witness its own end. When the lights go out for one character, they flicker on for another. maybe not in a way your current identity would recognize, but still, on. And this is the thought that changes everything. You don't have to cling to the fear of non-existence, because what you truly are never began, and what never began cannot end. Consciousness might wear 1,000 names, live 1,000 lives, forget itself again and again, but it never stops. The dream changes, the dreamer remains. So, the next time you fear death, ask yourself this: if everything about you changed, and someone else woke up with no memory of you, would that be the end? Or would it just be the beginning of another chapter in a book that never truly closes? You've never stopped being. You've just forgotten how vast you truly are. What if I told you that death is not a destination you arrive at, but an illusion your mind has been trained to believe in? You've probably never questioned it deeply. It just feels obvious. You're alive now. One day, you won't be. And in that imagined future, your mind creates an image. Maybe a vast, black void. Maybe some kind of ethereal landscape. Maybe silence, stillness, nothingness. The picture might be comforting or terrifying, but either way, it's a picture, and that's the problem. Your brain has been conditioned to think of death as a place, a condition, a thing that happens to you. We use language that reinforces this every day. We say, someone went to a better place. We talk about what it's like to be dead. We speak of people as being in the afterlife, or gone forever. But all of this language implies that death is a location in space or time, a fixed state you enter into. And yet, the moment you actually look at what's behind those words, it all falls apart. Think about it. You never speak that way about sleep. You don't say, last night, I went to the land of unconsciousness. You simply slept, and then you woke up. There was no place you traveled to, no black ocean of non-being that swallowed you. It was just a shift, a temporary lapse in experience. And when you emerged from it, the world was still here. You were still here. So why do we imagine death to be different? The truth is, we've created a false mental model of death because we are deeply uncomfortable with uncertainty. We want to make sense of the unknown, so we frame it using the tools we understand: time, space, movement, cause, and effect. In this case, we project death as something you can be in, a condition where you either cease to exist or continue in some altered form. But in doing so, we miss the deeper truth entirely. You see, death is not an experience, and that's not just poetic, it's literal. You can experience dying, the process, the sensations, the changes, but you cannot experience death itself. There is no you there to experience it. In every moment of your life, even the most unconscious ones, your awareness has always been the foundation. Even in sleep or anesthesia, you return. There's a continuity, a stream, but death, as we've come to imagine it, breaks that. It's the end of experience. And yet, paradoxically, the very concept of ending requires an experiencer to notice the end. This is the core misunderstanding. To say, I will be dead, is already a contradiction. Because in order to know you are dead, you would have to be aware of being dead. But if awareness continues, then you are not dead in the way you imagined. And if awareness does not continue, then there is no you to be aware of that state. Either way, being dead is not something you can be. It is only something others describe about you. From the outside, language traps us. It frames death as a kind of exile, a crossing over into a realm we can't describe but often fear. We picture it the way we imagine distant countries we've never visited, a place filled with mystery and danger. But death is not a country. It is not a border. It is not even an event. It is a shift in the lens through which consciousness experiences itself. If you take a candle and blow it out, you say the flame is gone, but where did it go? Did it fall into some dark abyss of non-existence? Or did the conditions that supported it simply change, causing the appearance of the flame to vanish? The energy that created it doesn't disappear, it simply transforms. So why should awareness be any different? We fear death because we believe we are going somewhere. Somewhere unknown, somewhere final, somewhere inescapable. But that belief is rooted in the illusion that you are an object moving through time. That you are a body walking toward a cliff, and once you fall off that cliff, everything ends. But you've never been an object. You are not your body. You are the awareness that has observed that body grow, change, age, and awareness doesn't fall off cliffs. It shifts, it pivots, it transitions. Here's the part that most people miss. The terror we feel about death doesn't come from death itself. It comes from trying to imagine what it would be like to be there. But that's the trap. There is no there. There is no observer in the place we call death. And because of that, the fear is based entirely on a projection, an imagined scenario that never arrives. You've already had moments in your life where experience paused, moments where time skipped and you disappeared, under anesthesia, in dreamless sleep, in deep meditative absorption. And yet, you were never afraid of those moments, because you didn't imagine being trapped in them. You simply returned. The stream of experience continued. And you didn't mourn the lost hours, you just kept going. What would change if you saw death that way? Not as a hallway into darkness, but as a shift in the lens of perception. Not a void, but a turning of the page. Not an end, but a reorientation. What if, instead of picturing death as a wall, you saw it as a window? A transparent boundary through which awareness continues, just no longer as the character you were playing. So much of your identity is wrapped around the idea that you are the body, the mind, the name, the timeline. But you've changed so many times in this life already. You've been different people across different stages: child, teenager, adult, skeptic, seeker. And yet, something has remained constant through it all. Something has been looking out from behind your eyes, listening behind your ears, sensing behind your thoughts. That something has never known death. It has only known now. So if you've never been outside of awareness, and if awareness is not a place but a state, then what exactly are you afraid of when you fear death? You're not afraid of non-existence. You're afraid of imagining yourself in a state that can never be experienced. You're afraid of being awake in darkness forever, but you forget that even that would still be an experience. What we call death is the absence of content, not the presence of something terrifying. It's the ceasing of a particular narrative, not the end of consciousness itself. What you truly are cannot be located in time or space, and that's why death doesn't contain you, because it was never meant to. It's not a room you walk into, it's not a cliff you fall from, it's not even an experience you have. It's a letting go of the illusion that you were ever confined to a single place, a single body, a single story. So maybe it's time to stop asking, what happens when I die? And instead start asking, what is it that lives through me now? Because that is the only part of you that was never born, and it's the only part of you that doesn't need to fear what comes next. Have you ever wondered what exactly it is that's reading these words right now? Not the eyes or the brain, but the you behind it all. The one who's aware, noticing, feeling, thinking. You don't see it in a mirror, you can't hold it in your hands, and yet, it's the most intimate part of your existence. It's not something you look at, it's what you are. This subjectivity, this first-person experience of being, is so fundamental that we often overlook it entirely. You are not a thing in the world, looking out. You are the space in which the world appears. And this brings us to a truth most people never consider. Subjectivity isn't a part of the universe like trees or stars or atoms. It isn't a small flame trapped inside your skull, waiting to be extinguished at death. It's not a tiny light you can switch off when the body fails. Because subjectivity, awareness, is not a point. It's a field. A boundless, borderless field within which everything else appears. Try this. Close your eyes for a moment and notice what's present. Sensations, thoughts, sounds. Maybe the hum of a nearby appliance or the subtle rhythm of your own breath. All of these are objects in awareness. But awareness itself? You can't see it. You can't find its edges. There's no place where it begins or ends. And that's the secret. Awareness isn't something you have, it's what you are. It's not a thing in the world, it's the space in which the world arises. Now here's where it gets really strange. Because if awareness is not an object in the world, then the laws of the world don't apply to it in the same way. Objects are born and die, they come and go. But subjectivity doesn't arrive from somewhere, and it doesn't depart. It simply is. It doesn't move through time, time moves through it. You don't observe awareness like you do a tree or a memory or an emotion. You are awareness. And this means that death, as we've been taught to think of it, can't ever fully touch you. Think about it. You've been told that one day your consciousness will stop, that your thoughts will vanish, that you'll fall into a permanent silence. But what if that idea only makes sense when we confuse consciousness with content? Thoughts come and go, sensations arise and fall, stories start and end. But what sees all of this happening? That seer has never gone anywhere. It was here before you learned your name, before you formed your first memory, and it will still be here when all of those dissolve. Consciousness doesn't operate like a candle that burns and then goes dark. It's more like the sky, untouched by the clouds that pass through it. Even when storms rage, the sky remains. Even when night falls, it's still there, holding space for the stars. You are that sky. And death? It may feel like the last breath of the body, the end of a heartbeat, the quiet of a still room, but it's not the end of awareness. It's the end of a particular experience within awareness, a shift, a transition, not a disappearance. Let's take this even deeper. If you try to locate awareness, to pin it down to a single spot, you'll find you can't. It's not inside your head, it's not behind your eyes. That's just where you've been taught to project it. But if you drop that story for a moment and just sit in stillness, something remarkable happens. Awareness opens, expands, it has no center. It's not yours in the personal sense, it's simply here. This is why some spiritual traditions refer to it as the field, an infinite canvas in which all form arises. And if that's true, if awareness is a field and not a point, then it cannot be destroyed the way a thing can be destroyed. You can lose your house, you can lose your memories, you can even lose your sense of identity, but you cannot lose awareness, because you never had it. You are it. You are the field noticing the loss. The field doesn't burn, it doesn't break, it doesn't age, it just remains. Now, consider the moment of death. The body ceases to function, the brain stops sending signals. But what if what you really are, this subjective field of awareness, was never confined to the body to begin with? What if it simply expressed itself through the body, like light through a stained glass window? When the window breaks, the light doesn't disappear, it just stops shining in that particular shape. But the light continues, the source remains untouched. This is the shift that death represents, not an end, but a reconfiguration. A return to what you were before you thought you were you. This doesn't mean you'll wake up in a cloud with your name and your memories intact. That's still clinging to the illusion of personal permanence. No, it means that the stream of awareness never breaks, that the gap you fear, the silence, the void, the nothingness, is not something that can ever be experienced. Because for something to be experienced, there must be awareness, and if awareness is always present, then even death is held within it. What dies is the form, the pattern, the specific constellation of sensations and thoughts that made up the character you called yourself. But the light behind the character, the presence watching the entire play, that doesn't die. It simply takes off one mask and tries on another. The scene changes, the actor remains. You've felt this before, even if you didn't realize it. Think of a moment where time seemed to stop, when everything became still and silent and strange, maybe during meditation, maybe at the edge of sleep, maybe in the middle of a heartbreak so deep you didn't know who you were anymore. In those moments, something else shines through, a stillness, a clarity, a presence that has nothing to do with your story. That presence is always here, and it's untouched by whatever you believe will happen when your body fails. This is the mystery most people miss because they're so busy identifying with the form, with the name, the past, the projections, but the deeper truth is quieter, more intimate. You are not the story. You are the screen. You are not the character in the dream. You are the dreamer, and the dreamer doesn't disappear when one dream ends. The dreamer simply begins again, a new dream, a new world, a new face in the mirror, but always the same light behind the eyes. This is why subjectivity cannot be turned off. It's not a machine, It's not a light switch. It's not housed inside the brain or trapped in a shell. It is fundamental, primal, the very condition of existence. Without it, there is no experience, no world, no time, no death. Only this moment. This mysterious now that stretches across lifetimes like a silent witness. You may forget who you are. You may forget everything you've ever known. But awareness will not forget you. Because it is you. And it never stops watching. Never stops being. Not even for a moment. Not even when the body turns to ash. Not even when the name is forgotten. The awareness remains. It always has. And it always will. What if I told you that everything you've ever been taught about your mind being inside your head might be wrong? Think about it. You've been conditioned to believe that your awareness is something trapped behind your eyes, locked inside your skull, bubbling up from a tangled web of neurons and synapses. And while that idea feels intuitive, especially in a world ruled by material science, it might not actually be true. In fact, it might be the very illusion that keeps you from realizing something extraordinary, that consciousness isn't confined to your body at all. You've heard it said 1,000 times, consciousness is the result of brain activity, just a side effect of electrical signals bouncing through gray matter. According to that view, you are your brain, and when the brain shuts off, so do you. It sounds logical at first, clean, simple, final. But if you start to look just a little closer, that explanation begins to unravel. Because no one, not even the brightest neuroscientists on the planet, can actually explain how consciousness arises from matter. They can track blood flow in the brain. They can observe correlations between brain regions and certain thoughts or emotions, but they cannot bridge the gap between physical activity and the experience of being. This is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. How does something like the color red, or the taste of salt, or the feeling of love, emerge from electrical impulses and chemical reactions? Science can tell you what parts of your brain are active when you feel joy, but it can't tell you why joy feels like anything at all. And this matters, because you're not just a machine performing tasks, you're a sentient being experiencing life. That experience itself is the mystery. And it doesn't behave like anything else in the physical world. Now here's where things get even more interesting. There's a growing number of scientists, physicists, and philosophers who are starting to entertain a very different possibility, that consciousness might not be produced by the brain at all, that instead of your brain creating awareness, it might be filtering or tuning into it, like a radio receiving signals that already exist. In that view, the brain is not the source, but the receiver. Consciousness is not local. It doesn't arise from within you, it passes through you. Quantum physics has already opened the door to this idea. In the quantum realm, particles don't behave like fixed, objective entities. They exist in a state of potential, a kind of cloud of probabilities, until observed. And what collapses that potential into a single outcome? Observation, awareness. That's not speculation, that's science. The observer effect is one of the most confounding and profound discoveries in modern physics. It suggests that consciousness may play a fundamental role in shaping reality itself. And if that's true, then awareness isn't a side effect of matter, it might be the very thing that gives matter its form. Other thinkers go even further. Panpsychism suggests that consciousness is not unique to humans or animals, but is a fundamental feature of the universe itself. Just as gravity or electromagnetism are baked into the fabric of existence, so is consciousness. In this view, even the most basic particles of matter possess some form of awareness, even if it's primitive, even if it's nothing like your human experience. And if that's the case, then consciousness didn't suddenly emerge in human brains after billions of years. It's always been here, waiting to express itself in more complex forms. Idealism, another powerful philosophical perspective, flips the whole paradigm completely. Instead of assuming that consciousness arises from matter, idealism proposes that matter arises from consciousness. That what we call the physical world is actually a manifestation within a deeper, underlying field of awareness. In other words, reality isn't made of atoms, it's made of experience. And that experience is shared, flowing, infinite, not constrained by biology or time or form. So, if consciousness is not local, if it's not created inside your head, then what happens when your brain stops working? That's the question most people never dare to ask. Because if your mind isn't bound to your physical body, then death isn't the end of consciousness, it's simply the end of a particular receiver. The channel changes, the broadcast continues. This is where the work of philosophers like Thomas Clarke comes into view. Clarke presents a fascinating argument that undermines our assumptions about death and non-existence. He points out that the concept of being plunged into nothingness after death is a cognitive illusion. Why? Because there is no you there to experience the nothingness. The error, he explains, is imagining death as a condition that consciousness enters into, as though the subject is dropped into a void and trapped there forever. But that's not how awareness works. If consciousness is not created by the brain, but rather filtered through it, then the cessation of brain activity does not equal the cessation of experience. It equals the cessation of a particular form of experience. You don't fall into oblivion, you transition into a different perspective. Just like when you go under anesthesia and then wake up without ever experiencing the absence in between. The continuity is unbroken because awareness isn't relying on a specific stream, it simply picks up where it left off, from wherever it is able to do so. And here's the part that truly changes everything. If consciousness is non-local, if it exists beyond space and time, then it cannot go anywhere. It doesn't fade, fracture, or vanish. It doesn't belong to the body belongs to it. The body is a temporary lens. Consciousness is the light shining through it. So when the lens breaks, the light does not go out. It simply shines in a new direction. You may have already had moments in your life where this became clear to you without needing any philosophy or physics to explain it. Maybe during a moment of deep meditation, maybe in the stillness between thoughts, maybe during a crisis where, for just a second, you felt yourself expand beyond the edges of your identity. You weren't thinking, you were just aware. Unshaped, untethered, unlimited. That was you. Not the thinking you, not the role-playing you, but the presence that watches it all unfold. You are not the character, you are the screen on which the character is projected. And the screen does not disappear when the film ends. It waits, it remains, it is ready for the next story. This is why the notion of a final end doesn't make sense when applied to consciousness. Endings belong to narratives, they belong to objects in space. But awareness has never been a thing, it has only ever been a presence. You can't burn it, bury it, or trap it in a box. You can't measure it in inches or seconds. It doesn't come from somewhere, and it doesn't go anywhere. It simply is, always. So if you've ever feared that death is the end of everything you are, take a step back and ask, what if you've never really been in your body to begin with? What if you've simply been looking through it? What if your awareness was never yours alone, but a drop in an infinite sea that is always flowing, always knowing, always becoming? Then the fear begins to dissolve, because what you are is not fragile, it's not temporary, it's not at risk. What you are is the knowing behind all experiences, the stillness behind all change, the silence behind every thought, and once you understand that, death is no longer something to dread. It becomes something else entirely, a transition, not a termination, a new lens, not a last breath, a continuation of the one thing that has never left you, not even for a moment, your awareness. What if I told you that reincarnation is real, but not in the way you've always imagined, not as the soul of John becoming James in the next life, not as some cosmic wheel recycling your memories and past mistakes into another round of karmic lessons? No, the truth may be even more mysterious and more impersonal than that, because what you call you, your name, your face, your personal history, is not the true traveler. It's the luggage. The real journey is being taken by something much deeper, something that doesn't carry a passport or a past, something that doesn't need to remember who it was in order to continue being. Right now, you exist at the center of your own world. Everything appears from your point of view. You open your eyes, and a world appears. You hear your own thoughts, and they sound like your voice. This perspective is so intimate, so continuous, that it's easy to believe it's yours and yours alone. But what if this sense of being someone is less like a singular identity and more like a mask that awareness tries on for a while? What if awareness isn't yours at all, but rather you are a temporary expression of it? Imagine your consciousness not as a personal flame being passed from candle to candle, but as a universal light that shines through different windows. When one window breaks or closes, the light doesn't vanish. It simply streams through a new opening, and from that new vantage point, a new world appears, a new story begins. There's no memory of the last view, no link to the window that came before, but the light, the awareness, it's the same. This is what some have called impersonal reincarnation, not a return of you, but a return of experience itself. After death, you don't emerge into the afterlife with a clipboard full of lessons learned and spiritual grades assigned. Instead, experience simply continues, somewhere, from some point of view. Not as the same person, but still as someone. A new first-person witness, just as convinced of their identity as you are now. The story doesn't reset, it doesn't rewind to the beginning. It just keeps going forward. Consciousness doesn't die, it just forgets, and begins again. This is hard to grasp at first, because you've been conditioned to view your life as a linear timeline, with birth at one end and death at the other. But from the perspective of awareness itself, time doesn't run like that. It's not a straight line, it's a horizontal field. Each conscious being is like a ripple on that field, unique in shape, but made of the same water. You may feel separate, but separation is just a trick of form. Remove the form, and what's left is not nothingness, but the potential for more waves to rise. Think about it this way. You woke up into this life without any memory of the one before it, and yet, here you are, experiencing, feeling, being. You don't need to remember your past incarnation for this moment to be vivid, for this story to feel real. Why would the next moment of consciousness be any different? Just because it doesn't carry the label you doesn't mean it doesn't happen. The idea that your personal story must persist for awareness to continue is the illusion. You believe that when your particular thread ends, the whole tapestry stops weaving. But the loom doesn't rest just because one strand fades. There's an odd kind of comfort in this idea, though at first it may feel unsettling, because it requires you to release your grip on the story you've been telling yourself your whole life. It asks you to surrender your name, your narrative, your need to continue as you. But what you get in return is something much more vast, the understanding that awareness is never interrupted. The story you are experiencing right now is one scene in an infinite play. When this chapter closes, another will begin, somewhere, as someone. And the one thing that connects them all isn't memory or personality, it's the silent fact of being. That's the true continuity. Not the continuity of ego, but the continuity of subjectivity. The feeling of I am never goes away. Its content changes, the scenery changes, the language, the face, the thoughts, all of it shifts. But the sense of being, of presence, remains untouched. Like a dreamer who wakes up in different dreams every night, never recalling the last one, but always feeling like a me within each. That's how awareness seems to move, not through time, but through points of view. And so the idea of you ending is really just the ending of a role. It's the character closing their final act and stepping off stage. But the actor, the awareness itself, is already preparing for a new performance, a new costume, a new setting, a new script, and from that new position, the world once again appears. The lights come on, the show begins, and there, at the center of it all, is a new sense of self, just as vivid, just as convinced it is real. From this angle, death loses its teeth, because if you can never experience non-experience, and if awareness cannot be turned off, then there is no final exit, there's just a movement. A shift in scenery. The you that you think must survive doesn't need to. It was never the essential part. What is essential is that experience keeps happening, that the lights keep coming on somewhere. And they do. What's more, this perspective can shift how you live your life now. Because once you stop clinging to the idea that you are this fixed self moving through time, you start to relax into something deeper. You begin to identify with the awareness behind the mask, rather than the mask itself. You find peace in the knowing that even if you don't persist, being does, and that's what you truly are. You are not the story. You are the storyteller's voice, the silent witness behind the unfolding. You are not the face in the mirror, you are the gaze that sees. And when this life ends, that gaze doesn't go blind. It simply looks out through another pair of eyes, hears through new ears, feels new joy and pain, starts over, not as a continuation, but as a fresh arrival, still awake, still present. This is the mirror of rebirth, not a reincarnation of memory, but a reappearance of awareness. You are not reborn as yourself, but as someone, somewhere, sometime, not because a soul traveled through space, but because awareness never stops radiating. You are that radiance, and no death, no boundary, no forgetting can touch it. So, the next time you think about death, remember this. The illusion is that you end. The reality is that awareness never does. It just slips into a new form and opens its eyes again, fresh, silent, and timelessly present, always returning, always beginning, always being. What if I told you that you've already experienced death, and not just once, but for billions of years? Long before you were born, long before you had a name or a face or a thought in your mind, you were nowhere to be found. You weren't floating in the cosmos, you weren't waiting in a line of souls, you weren't suspended in time, you simply weren't. And yet, that absence didn't trouble you, you didn't resist it, you didn't even know it was happening. Think about that for a moment. For 13.8 billion years, the universe existed without you. Galaxies formed, stars were born and died, entire civilizations may have risen and vanished before your first breath, and none of it felt like suffering, none of it felt like waiting. It wasn't boring or painful or endless, it was nothing, and from your perspective, it passed in the blink of an eye. No awareness, no commentary, no sense of missing out, just the absence of presence. So the question becomes, if you were at peace in that silence before life began, why should you fear returning to it? If the non-existence that came before you was effortless, undisturbed and unknowable, why assume the one that may follow life is any different? The fear we carry about death is almost always rooted in the idea of being dead, of somehow being present in our own absence. We picture ourselves in the void, staring out at nothing, trapped in a state of non-being. But that image is a contradiction, because non-being has no self, no witness, no awareness to hold the experience. You cannot experience the absence of experience. You cannot observe your own non-existence, just like you couldn't observe your pre-birth state. And that's what makes this so interesting. The terror of death is based entirely on a misinterpretation. You're afraid of something you've already gone through and didn't even notice. That's the strange comfort hidden in the truth. If death is a return to what came before, then you already know how to do it. You've done it once, you've done it for longer than you've been alive. And that makes this short stretch of life, this moment, this flicker of awareness, the anomaly, not the rule. You emerged from timeless silence and began to speak, think, feel, cry, laugh. And one day, you'll return to silence, but that silence is not your enemy, it's your original state. But of course, that's not how we usually think about it. We imagine a loss, a taking away. We picture death as a thief who robs us of everything we've built, our identity, our relationships, our memories. We cling tightly to the idea that what we have now is the full picture. But you only believe that, because this is the part of the story you remember. This life is the segment with a soundtrack. It has color, shape, emotion, time. The silence that bookends it feels like a void only because your mind can't reach it. It has no memory of being unborn, and so it fears being unmade. But here's the deeper truth. You are not the body. You are not the personality. You are the awareness that witnesses both, and awareness never truly touches time. It observes time, it experiences time, but it is not bound by it. That's why those moments before you were born don't feel like an eternity. From the perspective of awareness, They didn't happen to you, because you weren't yet the observer. It's like waking up from a deep, dreamless sleep. You open your eyes, and time has passed. But you didn't feel the passage. You didn't suffer through it. You didn't age inside the sleep. One moment you were conscious, then nothing, then conscious again, and in between, no fear, no waiting, just stillness. Now stretch that concept out across the vast sweep of cosmic time. You were not here when the first stars lit up the sky. You were not here when the earth cooled, or when the first cell divided, or when ancient trees reached toward prehistoric skies. But you don't mourn that absence. You don't look back at the millennia before your birth and cry over the moments you missed. You accept, intuitively, that they were not yours to experience, and because of that, they do not hurt you. So why do we imagine that what comes after life will be different? Why do we frame it as a punishment, a loss, a cruel blankness? Maybe because we've become so identified with the character we play in this life that we forget we weren't always here. The ego wants to continue, the story wants to go on, and when it can't imagine its own absence, it panics. It creates images of forever nothingness and projects itself into them, suffering in an illusion that will never come. But look closer. That fear you feel? It's not about death itself. It's about imagining yourself being dead, but you will never be dead in the way you imagine. You may stop breathing. Your heart may stop beating. The world may move on without your name, but the one who sees, who feels, who knows, was never truly confined to a name in the first place. And that, seeing, either shifts or it dissolves without suffering. Some say that death is the final sleep, but maybe it's more accurate to say that birth was the interruption. Birth broke the stillness. It introduced you to a dream, a vibrant, moving, emotional journey through form and sensation. And when it ends, perhaps the silence simply returns, not as punishment, but as peace, not as exile, but as home. So, ask yourself, are you afraid of death? Or are you afraid of losing your identity? The truth is, you've already done it before. For all the eons before you emerged into this moment, you had no identity, no fear, no loss. And yet, here you are. You came out of that silence once, and you called it life. If you return to it, who's to say you won't emerge again? Maybe life and death are not two opposite states, but parts of a rhythm, an inhale and an exhale of awareness itself. Maybe the silence before birth and the silence after death are not endings at all. Maybe they are doorways. And maybe, just maybe, what you truly are is not bound to either side of that doorway. Maybe you are the space in which they both appear. There is nothing to fear in a return to what you've already known. And you have known it more deeply, more completely, than anything in this life. Because it was the ground from which this life arose, the emptiness that made room for form, the silence that made space for your voice. And that silence, it's not a threat, it's a reminder that you came from something timeless, and that what you truly are cannot be lost, only remembered. Every night, without fail, you disappear. You lay your head on the pillow, close your eyes, and allow yourself to drift away from everything you know. Your name, your plans, your worries, your desires, all of it fades. You surrender to sleep, and in doing so, you surrender your identity. The world you know dissolves, and something else takes its place. But here's the strange part. Even when you don't remember your dreams, even when it feels like you vanished into darkness, there's always something waiting on the other side. You wake up, you return. Not as a continuation of awareness in the way you remember it, but still as awareness, still as a point of view, still as the silent presence that experiences. Dreams offer a window into a mystery we rarely contemplate, the discontinuity of identity. In your dreams, you are often not yourself, not as you are in waking life. You might look different, act differently, live in a different time or place. You might even speak a different language, or believe things you would never believe while awake. And yet, within the dream, it feels normal, it feels real. You rarely question it. You accept the new world, the new story, the new self, because the continuity of awareness is still there. Even when everything else changes, there is still an I to witness it. The dream you might be a stranger, but the experience of being remains unchanged. Now, ask yourself, where does the waking self go when you're dreaming? Where is the version of you reading this right now, when you're running through a dreamscape that has no connection to your waking life? That version of you, the one with your memories, your name, your story, is gone. It's not just hiding in the background, it's been replaced. And yet, the stream of consciousness continues. The experiencer remains. You didn't bring your full identity into the dream, but you still brought awareness. Or rather, awareness brought the dream into itself. And sometimes, that awareness wakes up within the dream. This is what we call lucid dreaming. It's a strange and powerful moment when the dreamer becomes conscious of the dream. Suddenly, you realize you are not the character, you are the observer. The landscape doesn't change, but your relationship to it does. The illusion of being the dream self cracks, and you become something deeper, the presence behind the play. It's a reminder that even within a fabricated world, awareness remains sovereign. Even when lost in illusion, it can awaken to itself. This cycle of falling asleep, dreaming, and waking again happens thousands of times throughout your life, and each time, your sense of self dissolves and reforms. You don't cling to the fear that sleep will erase you forever, because you trust the return. You trust the continuity, even if it's not logical. And this trust is born not from faith, but from experience. You know that even when you vanish into nothingness, something remains, something returns. Now take that same process and apply it to death. What if death is not a final obliteration, but a deeper sleep, a more profound forgetting? A total surrender of the identity you've worn, only for awareness to return somewhere else, as someone else, just as it does each morning when you awaken from dreams? What if the so-called end is just another transition, an unremembered bridge between two chapters of experience? The reason dreams are such powerful metaphors for death is because they show us that identity is not required for awareness to function. You don't need to be you in order to have an experience. You just need to be present. And presence, it turns out, is far more fluid than we're taught. It flows effortlessly into different forms, different stories, different perspectives. You may think that what makes you you is the accumulation of memories, beliefs, and habits. But dreams reveal that all of that can vanish, and yet experience continues. There's something deeply liberating about realizing this, because it means that the part of you that clings to permanence is not the part that survives. The mind wants continuity of self, it wants to remain as it is. But awareness doesn't care about continuity of form, it cares about continuity of being. And being, unlike identity, doesn't require anything to be held onto. It simply is. Sometimes you dream of being a bird, other times a stranger in a foreign land. Sometimes you're the observer, other times the participant. Sometimes you remember the dream. Sometimes you wake up with only a vague feeling, a whisper of emotion. But no matter what the dream is, you always return. You always wake up, not because you clung to anything, but because the light of awareness simply shifted from one focus to another. So, what if death is just the next shift? What if, instead of falling into an endless void, you awaken, somewhere, as someone, just like you do every morning? And maybe you won't remember this life any more than you remember your dreams. Maybe your current name, your current story, your current concerns will all vanish, but experience will continue. And more importantly, you, the true you, the silent field of awareness, will still be present. Not as the person you thought you were, but as the presence that makes all persons possible. This doesn't mean that your memories or relationships are meaningless. On the contrary, they are precious precisely because they are fleeting. They are part of the dance of form. But what this deeper truth reveals is that they are not the foundation. The foundation is the one who experiences them, the unchanging presence that plays every role, lives every life, and dreams every dream. When you die, the body rests. The story concludes. The character's arc ends, but the dreamer does not. The dreamer has no beginning or end. It only shifts, reforms, awakens. You are not the dream. You are the one who dreams. You are not the self that changes. You are the awareness in which all change occurs. And just like in dreams, death may bring a moment of forgetting, a pause, a space between breaths, a silence so deep you cannot comprehend it. But that silence is not the end. It's the womb of the next moment, the space from which a new world arises, not one that remembers the old world, but one that is just as vivid, just as rich, just as real. And there you will be again, not as the old self returned, but as a new self revealed. In this light, death is not a wall, it's a veil, a thin, mysterious curtain between one experience and the next. You don't pass through it as the same person, you pass through it as the same presence. And when the next dream begins, it will feel just as real, just as immediate, just as alive as this one does now, because awareness doesn't remember what it was, it only knows what it is, always now, always here. You've been dying every night of your life, and you've been reborn each morning, not metaphorically, but literally. The person who wakes up is not the same one who fell asleep. The cells are different. The thoughts are new, the emotions have changed, but awareness remains, quiet, steady, watching it all unfold. So, when the time comes, when this final sleep approaches, don't fear it, don't resist it, recognize it for what it is, a return to the source, a reset of the dream, a letting go of one mask so another can be worn, because death is not the end of awareness, it is the doorway through which it slips into another story. And on the other side, as always, you will wake again. What if I told you that this life you're living, this world you touch, taste, fear, and love, might not be the base reality at all? That everything you see and feel, all the highs and lows, are part of a vast and complex simulation, a kind of interactive dream, so convincing that you've forgotten you were dreaming. It's not just science fiction anymore. Serious minds in physics and philosophy have begun to ask whether the universe we call real is simply a brilliantly constructed illusion, a simulation powered not by silicon and code, but by consciousness itself. The simulation hypothesis suggests that what you experience as the physical world might be more like a digital environment than a fundamental reality. Your body, an interface, your senses, input streams, your memories, your identity, your story, all parameters running within a larger system. If that's true, then the implications are massive, but there's one that matters more than any other. Death, in this model, is not the end. It's a log-off. Not of you, but of the avatar you're currently playing. Think about it. When you play a video game, you fully immerse yourself in the character. You run, jump, fight, explore. You feel emotion. You face consequences. But when the game ends, when the screen fades to black, you don't die. The character disappears. The world collapses into code. But you, the player, simply remove the headset. You remember it as an experience, not an ending. So what if that's what this is? What if your consciousness, the you behind your thoughts, behind your personality, behind your name, is not the character on the screen, but the one holding the controller? What if everything that happens in this world, including death, is happening to an avatar, not to the awareness behind it? That would change everything about how we see life, and more importantly, how we understand what happens after it ends. Here's where it gets even more fascinating. In many simulation models, data doesn't vanish when a character disappears. It's stored, it's preserved, it's integrated. So, even if your body is no longer online, the essence of what you experienced, the growth, the choices, the expansion, might not be lost. It might simply return to a larger consciousness that sent you here in the first place, like a memory returning to the mind that dreamed it. The fear of death, for most people, is rooted in the idea that we are the character. We identify so completely with this body, this personality, that we can't imagine anything beyond it. And that's understandable. The simulation is designed to be immersive. It has to feel real. If you knew, from the moment you were born, that none of this was permanent, that none of it could ultimately harm you, would you take it seriously? Would you care? Probably not. The illusion of finality is what makes this experience powerful. It's what gives meaning to time, to choices, to love. But behind that illusion is something far more enduring. You, the experiencer, the one who plays, the one who watches it all unfold, and that you is not bound by the rules of the game. The character may get hurt, age, or die, but the player simply moves on. Now, ask yourself this: have you ever had moments in your life that felt too strange, too synchronized, too perfectly timed to be random? Moments that felt as though someone was trying to reach through the veil of reality and whisper, "You're more than this." Maybe a dream that felt more real than waking life. Maybe a déjà vu that left you shaken. Maybe a moment of silence so profound that it felt like the universe was breathing through you. These might not be glitches in the system. They might be clues, breadcrumbs, reminders that the world you're immersed in is not the end of the story. It's just a level. In this model, death is not the final curtain. It's the moment when the simulation no longer needs your participation. Maybe you've learned what you came to learn. Maybe your storyline has played out. Or maybe, just like closing a book after the final chapter, it's time to begin a new one. Either way, the experiencer continues. Because the experiencer was never inside the game to begin with. And let's take this one step deeper. If consciousness is the user, not the character, then your awareness might not even be limited to one avatar. Just like a gamer can switch characters, consciousness might play out many lives, many stories, across different simulations, and each time, it forgets, for the sake of immersion. It willingly chooses to not remember the broader truth, just so it can live this life fully. That means, you might be much more vast than you've ever imagined. You might be an extension of something that spans not just this life, but infinite others, not just this world, but layers beyond it. And that consciousness, that you, behind the character, doesn't end. It can't, because it never truly began. It entered this simulation not through birth, but through attention. It looked into this world and chose to become immersed, and when it leaves, it doesn't die. It remembers. It remembers the character you played, the lessons you learned, the love you gave, the pain you endured, the joy you found. All of it becomes part of something larger, a deeper intelligence, a broader self. So, when your character's story ends, there is no tragic conclusion. There is only return, integration, a waking up. And this doesn't have to conflict with spirituality. In fact, many ancient traditions have said similar things for centuries. That this world is Maya, illusion, that life is a dream we wake from, that the self is not the body, but the witness. The simulation hypothesis simply offers a new language for an ancient truth, that reality is not as solid as it appears, and that consciousness is primary. You are not a cluster of atoms bumping through random chaos. You are not a collection of thoughts reacting to a cold, meaningless universe. You are awareness itself, embodied temporarily in this story, in this avatar, in this dream, and when the dream ends, you do not, because you never were the dream, you were the dreamer. So what is death then? Not an ending, not a vanishing, but a log-off, a transition, a return to the deeper field of consciousness that sent you here in the first place, not to suffer, but to learn, not to be punished, but to play, not to disappear, but to awaken. And now, perhaps, you can begin to feel it, that quiet knowing in your bones that the simulation cannot contain you, that the body is not the boundary of your being, that the end of this story is not the end of you, because you were never just the character, you were the presence holding the controller all along. What happens when a person comes as close to death as possible, when the heart stops, the brain shuts down, and all the signs of life vanish? Only for that person to return with memories of something more vivid than waking life? For thousands across cultures, ages and belief systems, this moment is not a plunge into blackness, it's an awakening. These accounts, often called near-death experiences, have become some of the most fascinating and controversial pieces in the puzzle of consciousness. People who are clinically dead for minutes, sometimes even longer, come back with stories not of fading into nothing, but of piercing clarity, not of silence, but of profound awareness. It would be easy to dismiss them all as hallucinations, as tricks of a dying brain gasping for coherence in its final seconds. And yet, there's something in these accounts that refuses to be ignored. It's not just the consistency, the tunnel of light, the feeling of floating above the body, the sense of being embraced by a presence beyond words. It's the effect. People return from these experiences transformed. The fear of death dissolves. The ego shrinks. Love, compassion, and meaning take precedence over the shallow pursuits of the world. Whether these experiences are spiritual truths or neural illusions, their impact is undeniable, and that impact whispers a radical possibility: that consciousness does not go quietly. It doesn't simply flicker out when the body fails. It expands. What's most striking about near-death experiences isn't the imagery, it's the awareness. People describe these moments with phrases like "more real than real" or "a clarity beyond anything I've ever known." Some speak of colors they can't describe, sounds that feel like emotion, a sense of time that stretches out forever and yet collapses into an eternal now. They report seeing everything about their lives unfold in a single instant, not as a movie, but as a full-body knowing. And throughout it all, one thing remains constant: the presence of consciousness, not dulled or dimmed, but sharpened, not vanishing, but expanding beyond the borders of the body. This is important because it challenges our most basic assumptions about the mind. We tend to think of consciousness as a byproduct of the brain, a temporary light that flickers when the machinery is working and extinguishes the moment it fails. But these experiences offer a different story. If the brain is truly shutting down, if electrical activity has flatlined, how is it that people are experiencing such richness? How can they recall specific conversations happening in rooms they weren't physically present in? How can they recount details they had no way of perceiving? These are not isolated incidents. They span cultures, religions, and belief systems. Children report them, skeptics report them, and the stories share core elements. Even if, for the sake of argument, we say these are just brain-generated hallucinations, that explanation still fails to dull the insight. Because, hallucination or not, these are states of heightened awareness, and that, in itself, is enough to shake our models. When you expect darkness and find light, when you expect silence and find a song that sings through your whole being, something has to give. The theory might say the light is an illusion, but the experience says the light is real, and in the end, it's the experience that transforms the person, not the theory. Think about what this means. At the very edge of biological death, when the body seems to be in its final act, consciousness doesn't fade, it intensifies. People feel more awake, not less, more alive, not less. This raises the question: what if consciousness doesn't depend on the body at all? What if the body is a filter or a receiver, and when it begins to shut down, awareness actually begins to expand beyond the limitations of the physical form? Like removing a mask you didn't know you were wearing, like stepping out of a dimly lit room into a sky full of stars. And then there's the universal sense of being welcomed. So many NDEs involve an encounter with a presence, sometimes described as a being of light, sometimes as a voice, sometimes as a feeling, but always radiating unconditional love. This love is not like anything we know on earth. It is not transactional. It asks for nothing. It judges nothing. People say they felt completely known and completely accepted, all at once. Imagine what it means for the last moment of your life to be not one of terror, but of embrace, not one of isolation, but of reunion. That is not the signature of non-existence. That is the fingerprint of something greater. Even those who don't see lights or beings speak of a deep peace, a letting go, a clarity that cuts through all the noise. It's as if something essential rises up when everything else falls away. No name, no story, no history, just awareness, just presence. And when they return, that presence doesn't leave them. It follows them into waking life. They often say things like, "I'm not afraid anymore," or "I know I'm not just this body." These are not beliefs, they're recognitions, and recognitions tend to stick. Now, let's be honest, there is no way to prove what these experiences mean. Science doesn't have instruments delicate enough to measure the soul. Philosophy doesn't have language rich enough to capture what happens when the veil thins. But what we do have is the undeniable testimony of those who have gone to the edge and come back changed. And when thousands of people across the world describe a similar transformation, we would be wise to listen. This isn't about creating a new dogma or proving a particular religious view. It's about opening to the mystery of what you are. It's about recognizing that maybe consciousness isn't fragile. Maybe it's not this delicate flame we've been taught to protect from the winds of time. Maybe it's the wind itself, moving through everything, invisible but undeniable. And in those rare moments when someone steps outside the boundaries of time and space, maybe they're not glimpsing something foreign, maybe they're just remembering. The point here isn't whether every NDE is factually accurate. The point is that something in those moments breaks open the illusion of finality. Death, for those who've approached it and returned, isn't an end. It's a shift, a crossing, a homecoming. And even if the whole thing could somehow be mapped to neurons firing in desperation, the result is still the same. A person comes back knowing, deep in their bones, that awareness doesn't die easily. That consciousness holds on, or maybe, that it lets go in the most beautiful way possible. So what does this mean for you? It means that the thing you fear, falling into nothing, may be based on a false image. It means that you don't have to cling to life in panic or walk toward death in dread. It means that, at the very edge, when everything else slips away, awareness does not abandon you. In fact, it may be most fully revealed. And in that revelation, you may find that you were never in danger at all. That the light was never outside of you. It was you. You don't need to have a near-death experience to begin remembering this. You can start right now, by becoming aware of the awareness that's already here. By noticing that even in the quietest moments, something is still present. Watching, listening, being. That presence doesn't belong to the body. It doesn't belong to thought. It's not held by memory or name. And when the body falls away, when the thoughts go silent, when the names are forgotten, that presence will still be here, clear, silent, unshaken. So the next time you wonder what happens when you die, don't just look outward, look inward. The same awareness that witnesses this moment is the awareness that will be there in the next. Whether through dreams, through silence, or through a burst of infinite light, it will continue, not as the person you think you are, but as the awareness that has always been. Not ending, just shifting. Just remembering what it truly is. What if I told you that death isn't the end of the road, but a bend in the path? Not a wall that blocks you, but a door that opens into something deeper, something wider than the life you think you know. We often imagine death as this abrupt halt, a black screen, a vanishing point where everything familiar slips into oblivion. But what if that's the illusion? What if death isn't a full stop, but a pause between breaths, a brief moment of stillness before the next unfolding? You've been taught to see life and death as opposites, two endpoints on a straight line. But consciousness doesn't move in straight lines. It moves like water, like light, like wind. It flows, it bends, it shifts shape. So maybe death isn't a disappearance. Maybe it's a transformation, a moment where awareness, which never truly belonged to the body, simply changes its lens of perception. Remember what you've already discovered. You've never actually experienced the absence of consciousness. Even in the deepest sleep, the most dreamless nights, you've never had the sensation of being gone. You always return, not as someone new, but as the same awareness, the same experiencer. And that continuity, this unbroken sense of I am, has been with you from the beginning. It is the one thing that has never left you, no matter how much else has changed. This is the secret that hides in plain sight. Subjective continuity. The feeling of being you has never required a name, a story, or even a body. It has simply required presence, a field of awareness within which experience can arise. Even when your memories fade, even when your identity dissolves, even when time seems to collapse around you, this presence remains, quiet, watching, still. And yet, our minds struggle with this. They want to locate you in space, to tether you to a form. So when the form begins to fail, when the breath slows, when the body prepares to return to dust, the mind panics. It believes that the witness is dying too. But that belief is based on an epistemic illusion, a false conflation between who you are and what you appear as. The mind assumes that since the body ends, the experiencer must also end. But that's like watching a wave recede into the ocean and believing the ocean itself is gone. You are not the wave, you are the water. The form may rise, crest, and fall, but the essence remains. It merges back into the vastness it came from, not lost, not erased, simply returned. And in that returning, something beautiful happens. The wave remembers it was never separate to begin with. So, when you imagine death, try not to picture a dark void or a sudden drop. Picture instead a window that becomes transparent, a lens that's no longer needed, a mask that falls away. Consciousness doesn't vanish, it steps into new expression. Just as light passing through different windows casts different colors, your awareness can shine through many forms. But the light itself, untouched, unchanged, eternal. You've seen this already in your own life. You've worn many masks: child, teenager, adult, student, lover, friend, stranger. Each role felt real in its time. Each identity carried its own joys and wounds. But beneath every role, there was always a deeper you watching it unfold. And that deeper self didn't vanish when the roles changed. It witnessed them, held them, let them go. So why should death be any different? Maybe death is the final costume change in this act of the play. Maybe it's the moment when the actor steps off stage, not into silence, but into another script, another scene, another way of being. And if that's true, then what you are can never be threatened, because what you are was never just a character, it was the stage itself. This is why so many wisdom traditions use the ocean as a metaphor, not to sound poetic, but to point to a deeper structure of reality. The wave and the ocean are not two things. The wave is simply the ocean expressing itself for a time, with a beginning and an end. It rises from the sea and returns to it, but the sea remains vast, still, infinite. So now, ask yourself, what if you are not just the form you think you are? What if you are the ocean dreaming of itself as a wave? What if the end you fear is just the moment the dream shifts and the water returns to itself? You don't need to believe in reincarnation or heaven or any particular story to see the truth of this. All you need is to look honestly at your own experience of awareness, to recognize that what you are is not in the body, but witnessing through the body, that you are not located in time, but observing its passage, that the light behind your eyes is the same light that's been there since the beginning, and it didn't come from neurons or cells, it was never born, it simply appeared, and if it wasn't born, then it cannot die. That doesn't mean there won't be fear, it's natural. The ego fears its end because it was built to protect form, but you are not the ego. You are not the voice in your head or the story it tells. You are the awareness hearing that voice, and when that voice falls silent, you will still be. Just not as a name, not as a role, but as presence itself. So let's return to the metaphor. Imagine a door. On one side is the life you know, touch, sound, memory, identity. On the other side is what you can't yet see. Not because it's not real, but because it's beyond the scope of the senses. The door doesn't destroy you, it doesn't erase you, it simply opens. And what walks through isn't a person, it's the essence of what you've always been, consciousness, flowing into its next form. That door is not the enemy. It's not a punishment. It's part of the architecture of life. Just as the seed must split to become the tree, just as the caterpillar must dissolve to become the butterfly, so too must your temporary form yield to something greater. Not because you are lost, but because you are becoming more of what you truly are. So maybe death is not something to fear but something to bow to. Not because it ends you, but because it reveals you. And maybe, just maybe, when your time comes to walk through that door, you will feel something ancient stir within you, a knowing that this is not unfamiliar, that you've done this before, that the silence on the other side is not empty, it is full. Full of new beginnings, full of deeper truths, full of the same presence that carried you through this life, watching, learning, loving, and now, finally, returning. Not to nothing, but to everything. What if I told you that no matter what happens to your body, your memories, or even your sense of self, you will always wake up somewhere? That the quiet presence you feel behind your thoughts, the one reading these words right now, is not something that can be erased, ended, or lost. It is not temporary. It is not fragile. It is not dependent on your heartbeat or your brainwaves. It is deeper than all of that, more ancient than your birth, more enduring than your death. And when everything else falls away, when the lights go out and the final breath leaves your lungs, that presence remains. Not in the way you might expect, not as you, but as awareness itself, pure and undivided, alive in a way beyond comprehension. Death is often feared as the final blackness, the ultimate nothing. But have you ever noticed that nothingness is something you've never experienced? Think about it. You've experienced silence, but you were still there to notice it. You've experienced unconsciousness, but you only know it in hindsight, from the moment you woke up. The one thing you have never experienced is non-being. You may have had moments where time vanished, where thought dissolved, where even your sense of self flickered, but there was always something left. Some presence to notice the absence, some awareness to return. This is the loop that cannot be broken. Consciousness always comes back. Not necessarily as the same person, not necessarily in the same world, but always in some form, always as someone, always at the center of some experience. Because the truth is, there is no such thing as nothing from the point of view of awareness. And since you can only ever experience from within awareness, you can never truly reach nothing. It is not a place you can go. It is not a state you can enter. It is simply not part of what you are. Imagine falling asleep. The moment before sleep takes you is soft, gradual, and filled with surrender. Your thoughts become mist. Your name loses weight. The edges of the world blur. And then, there's the drop, the falling, the release. But does that feel like an end? No, because what follows is not nothing, it's dreaming. And even when you don't remember the dream, something was still there. Awareness was still playing. And when you wake, the world rushes back in. Your memories reassemble, your name returns. But the presence that sees all this, it was never gone, it just shifted. Now, take that same falling feeling and stretch it into the unknown. Let it lead you into death, not as a collapse into darkness, but as a transition, a movement of awareness. Like sleep, it may come with no clear boundary. One moment you are here, the next you are not. But you are not nowhere. You are not nothing. You are just elsewhere. Awake in a new form, seeing through new eyes, feeling life from a new center. Maybe not with your current name, maybe not with any name, but still there, still present. This is not just a poetic idea. It is a realization born from the very nature of experience. Because awareness is not tied to who you are, it is tied to that you are. And that simple fact, your existence as a conscious point of view, is not something that can be undone. You are not just in the universe. You are what the universe is doing, right now, in this particular way. And just as a wave can crash and disappear, only to rise again from the same sea, your awareness may dissolve in one form, only to rise again in another. You have never actually known a time when you did not exist. You might say, but I don't remember before I was born. And that may be true, but you don't remember falling asleep either. You don't remember most of your dreams. And yet, you don't doubt that you were still there in some way, even if only in potential. What if the same is true on a cosmic scale? What if you are always returning, not as a repeat, not as a continuation of identity, but as a continuation of presence, of experience, of that sacred, first-person viewpoint that never truly stops? This is why the fear of death begins to lose its grip when you understand what you are. You are not the name, the story, or even the body. You are the open space in which all those things come and go. You are the awareness that watches the seasons change, the thoughts rise and fall, the emotions ebb and flow. And that awareness is not a product of the brain. It is not a flame flickering in your skull. It is the light in which the brain itself appears. It is the light in which everything appears. And light does not die. It may shift frequencies. It may change directions. But it doesn't vanish. It is always moving, always expressing, always finding new ways to reveal itself. You are part of that light, not separate from it, not added to it. You are of it. You are an aperture through which the eternal gazes upon itself. And just as the sun does not mourn the setting of one ray, it rejoices in the rising of another. There is a dignity in knowing that you are not bound to this moment. There is a reverence in realizing that nothing you do can destroy what you truly are. The body may tire, the mind may fracture, the name may fade, but that which sees, that which is, it does not die. It cannot die, because it was never born. It simply entered a particular shape, lived a particular life, and when that shape is done, it will return to the vastness from which it came, and in that vastness another life will rise, another point of view will open, another window will shine, and it will feel just as immediate, just as intimate, just as you. Not because it remembers this moment, but because it is this moment, restarted, continued, not carried by memory, but carried by awareness. And that awareness is never lost. It only moves forward. It only begins again. You don't have to remember the last dream to be in this one. You don't have to remember this one to be in the next. The thread that connects them all is not identity. It is presence. And presence is eternal. It is infinite. It is unbreakable. You can cover it with roles and stories and costumes, but you cannot extinguish it. You are that presence. And you always will be. So when the time comes, when your breath slows, and the world grows quiet, know this: you are not falling into nothing, you are falling into everything, you are returning to the place you never truly left. And from there, you will wake again, somewhere, somewhen, somehow, because you can't ever not be, you can't ever be lost, you can't ever be gone. What you truly are never dies.